For years, one sheet of paper said the money was there. It said that a company called Parmalat, the largest food business in Italy, held 3.95 billion euros, almost $5 billion, sitting in an account at Bank of America in New York. The letter guaranteed it. The auditors had seen it. The number went into the books, and the books went out to investors all over the world. In December 2003, Bank of America looked at that letter and said one thing: this is a forgery. The account had never existed. The signature on the page belonged to no one. There was no money. Behind that single fake letter sat a hole of about 14 billion euros, roughly $20 billion, the largest corporate collapse Europe had ever seen. A dairy company, milk cartons, and long-life cream, undone by the oldest trick there is: a fake letter from a real bank. And the strange part is how simple it was. No exotic instrument that nobody could follow. No cable at the bottom of the ocean. Somebody scanned a logo. Somebody forged a signature. Somebody faxed it back. And for years, it worked. This is the story of Parmalat, the company that ran out of milk money and printed the rest. Calisto Tanzi was born in 1938 in Collecchio, a small town in the dairy country outside Parma, in northern Italy. His family ran a modest food business, a local shop selling cured meats and preserves. He went to university, and he did not finish. Around the age of 22, he dropped out to take over the family trade. In 1961, he founded a company and called it Parmalat. The idea that built it was milk that did not spoil. Tanzi pushed long-life milk, the kind that sits on a shelf for months without a refrigerator. And in a country where fresh milk went sour in a day, that was close to magic. The cartons went everywhere. Over the next 40 years, Parmalat grew from a shop near Parma into one of the largest food companies on Earth. By April 2002, the group was valued at about 3.7 billion euros. It employed more than 30,000 people across roughly 30 countries. It had grown into one of the largest food companies in the world, and Parmalat cartons were a fixture on supermarket shelves. And Tanzi built more than a dairy. He bought the local football club, Parma, and poured money into it until it stood among the giants of Italian sport. He built a family tourism business called Parma Tour. He owned a television station, Odeon TV. He was the quiet king of Parma, the dropout who fed the country. Every piece of that empire ran on one thing: cash the company did not actually have. To grow that fast, Parmalat needed money, and it needed it constantly. So it did what modern companies do. It borrowed. It sold bonds and notes to investors around the world, promises to pay back a fixed sum with interest. Between 1998 and 2002, it sold roughly $1.5 billion of notes and bonds to investors in the United States alone. That is normal. Borrowing to expand is not a crime. But there was a detail that never fit, and a few careful people noticed it. Parmalat's own books said the company was sitting on a mountain of cash, billions of euros, liquid, ready to spend. And yet the company kept borrowing. Over and over, it went back to the market for more. Paying interest, it supposedly did not need to pay. If you are that rich, why do you keep taking out loans? In February 2003, that question got loud. The chief financial officer, a man named Fausto Tonna, announced another bond issue, 300 million euros more. The market flinched. Investors and analysts started asking out loud the thing they had been muttering for a while. A company claiming a fortune in the bank does not behave like a company that is short of money, and Parmalat behaved always like a company that was short of money. The cash on the books was the story. The borrowing was the truth. And to keep those two apart, Parmalat needed somewhere to hide the difference. Parmalat was not one company, it was a web of them. Around 200 affiliates, subsidiaries, and holding entities scattered across the map, many of them in places built for keeping secrets. The group used dozens of offshore companies to report assets that were not there. At the center of the web sat one small company in the Cayman Islands. Its name was Parmalat Financing Corporation. On paper, it was a financing arm. In practice, it was where the lies went to live. People close to the case described Parmalat as the group's wastebasket, the place where fictitious assets got parked so that nobody would look too closely. And this is where the second piece of the trick comes in, and it is dull, and it is legal, and it matters more than almost anything. Auditors. For years, Parmalat's books were checked by Grant Thornton in Italy, but Italian law forced companies to change their main auditor every 9 years to keep them honest. So in 1999, a bigger firm, Deloitte and Touche, became the principal auditor of the group. Grant Thornton did not leave, though. It stayed on to audit the subsidiaries, including Parmalat. Read that again. The firm, being rotated out for independence, kept the keys to the one company where the fraud actually lived. The wastebasket had a guard, and the guard was the firm most tangled up in it. Everything the collapse would later reveal was hiding in the one room that nobody with real power was watching. Here is the core of it. The single most important asset on Parmalat's books was 3.95 billion euros, almost $5 billion, that Parmalat supposedly held in cash and securities in an account at Bank of America in New York. Proved that money was real, and the whole empire stood up. It was not real, none of it. So Parmalat had to prove a lie. An auditor confirms cash in the simplest way there is. It writes to the bank and asks, "Does this company hold this money?" The letter goes out, the bank writes back, and the number gets checked against reality. That request is the safety net under the entire system. So Parmalat cut a hole in the net. According to what investigators and the courts later described, staff inside the company took a sheet of Bank of America letterhead and ran it through a scanner to make counterfeit bank stationery. They typed up a confirmation that said the billions were there. They added the forged signature of a bank secretary, a person confirming money that did not exist. Then they faxed it back to the auditors. What arrived was a smudged fax on Bank of America paper, and Grant Thornton, auditing Parmalat, relied on it and signed off, and that signature flowed straight up into Parmalat's group accounts, presented to the world as fact. How simple was it, really? An expert who watched investigators pull it apart put it to PBS as plainly as anyone ever has. They just took the letterhead of Bank of America, he said, and put on it the signature of a name of a secretary, confirming that the money was there. And the money wasn't there. The fake account was the biggest lie, but it was not the only one. To hide its losses and dress up the group, Parmalat leaned on financial instruments that almost nobody in the public could follow. Derivatives, something called credit-linked notes, where the company was in effect placing bets on its own ability to pay its own debts, layer on layer, all of it pointing the same way, all of it making a sick company look healthy. There was one more Cayman entity worth naming, a fund called Epicurum, holding a disputed position of around 500 million euros. Late in 2003, it became one of the first threads the auditors pulled, and it did not come loose cleanly. And here is the man in the middle of all of it. The chief financial officer, Fausto Tonna, helped build the very documents the auditors were meant to trust, while also running the finance operation that produced the accounts. In plain terms, he was checking his own forgery. When regulators finally added it all up, the picture was stark. The United States Securities and Exchange Commission found that Parmalat had inflated its assets by roughly $5 billion. And it found that Parmalat had understated its debt as of the end of September 2003 by 7.9 billion euros. Put another way, the company's real debt was more than double what its books admitted, more than 123% worse than the number it showed the world. By late 2003, the questions had finally reached the one place they could do real damage: the auditors. In November, Deloitte, the principal auditor, stopped nodding and started asking, formally, where was the Epicura money? Why did a company drowning in cash keep raising debt? The safety net, cut once, was starting to tear on its own. Then came the number that broke everything, and it was small. On the 8th of December 2003, Parmalat failed to pay back about 150 million euros of bonds that had come due. 150 million, a rounding error for a company that claimed billions in the bank, and it could not find the money. That is the moment the story turns, because it cannot be argued with. You can dispute an auditor. You can explain away a fund in the Caymans. You cannot pretend to pay a bond you have not paid. A company sitting on 3.95 billion euros in New York does not default on 150 million in Milan, unless the 3.95 billion was never there. Within days, the walls came in. Around the 15th of December, Calisto Tanzi resigned as chairman and chief executive of the company he had built over 40 years. The Italian government moved fast and installed a turnaround specialist named Enrico Bondi to take control. Tonner, the chief financial officer, was gone too. The people who knew where the bodies were buried were suddenly the people being asked to dig. On the 19th of December 2003, Bank of America said the words that ended it. Parmalat did not hold the billions it claimed. The bank had no such account. On the 23rd, its lawyers went further, and the American regulators would later use the same flat phrase. The purported confirmation had been forged. The letter was fake, and everyone now knew it. And once the letter was fake, everything the letter had propped up came down at once. On the 24th of December 2003, Parmalat was declared insolvent and placed under emergency administration. Christmas Eve for the largest food company in Italy. On the 27th, police arrested Calisto Tanzi. In custody, the man who had fed the country began to talk, and he admitted the thing he could no longer hide. There was a hole in Parmalat. By his own first account, a hole of about 8 billion euros. That was his number on day one. And even that was only the beginning. The real number was bigger. When the administrators and auditors finished counting, the hole in Parmalat came to about 14 billion euros, roughly $20 billion. It was, in the phrase that would follow the company forever, the largest bankruptcy in European history. 2 days after the arrest in New York, the SEC filed fraud charges against a milk company from Parma. So, what happened to the people who did this? Calisto Tanzi was tried more than once in more than one court. Across those trials, he was convicted of fraud, of market rigging, and of fraudulent bankruptcy. And at one point, he was sentenced to as much as 18 years. That is the headline number. Here is the quieter one. He ultimately served only about 2 years behind bars before he was moved to house arrest on grounds of age and poor health. The dropout who fed the country spent far more of his sentence in his own home than in a cell. Keep two crimes apart here, because the courts did. One was the accounting fraud, the giant lie in the group's books. The other was personal. Tanzi was found to have diverted an estimated 800 million euros out of Parmalat and into family hands, much of it into the tourism business, Parma Tour. That money did not vanish into an accounting error. It went home. Fausto Tonner, the chief financial officer who helped forge the letter, was convicted too. After years of appeals, his sentence was fixed at 8 years and 11 months, and he went back to prison. And the firms. Bank of America, sued by the administrator for $10 billion, settled in 2009 for $100 million, admitting no wrongdoing. Deloitte's Italian arm agreed in 2007 to pay $149 million for its part in the collapse. And in a separate case brought by American investors, Deloitte paid $8.5 million and Grant Thornton paid $6.5 million. 3 different settlements, 3 different pots, and not one of them close to $14 billion. So what became of Parmalat? The strange thing is that the company did not die. Enrico Bondi, the man sent in to clean up the wreckage, actually did it. He stripped the empire back to the parts that made money, chased the banks and the auditors for cash, and kept the brand alive. The milk on the shelves stayed on the shelves. Parmalat, the business, outlived the fraud that nearly killed it. Even the wiped-out investors clawed a sliver back, some of it in shares of the rebuilt company. Tanzi himself gave up more than his freedom. Investigators seized a private collection of around 19 works of art, valued at more than 100 million euros, hidden away as the company burned. They were auctioned off in Milan in 2019. The football club he loved was fined and stripped of points for false accounting. Calisto Tanzi died on the 1st of January 2022 at the age of 83. He had spent most of his sentence not inside a cell, but under house arrest. The quiet king of Parma, gone. Here is the through line, and it is the whole point. Parmalat was not some derivatives riddle that only a physicist could unpick. It was the oldest trick in commerce, a fake letter from a real bank, scaled up until it swallowed 14 billion euros and became the biggest corporate failure Europe had ever recorded. Somebody scanned a logo, and the world believed it for years. This has been Cooked Books. If you want more forensic files like this one, the archive is open.